start by saying how much I appreciate the opportunity of visiting you today, and for you agreeing to this interview. And maybe I'll just move things along a little bit because we've got a lot to cover. I'm aware that you are in your 90th year, and that you served in the militia before the war, and maybe you could just tell us a little bit about your militia experience.
Yes, well, at the age of, I think I must have been 19, I was working on a farm very close by here, which is all under houses now. We were playing cricket on the footpath, and I suppose 8 or 9 of us. And the captain came along, dressed in his uniform, and he said, I want to form a platoon down here, a militia platoon. And I think he got pretty well all the boys that were playing cricket this day. And it was the 15th 26th Battalion at that stage. Later became the 15th Militia Battalion. And on the 5th of September 1939, I beg your pardon, we were called up for duty 2 days after the war broke out. And I went straight to Moreton Island with, I think, 6 others, and where we guarded a cable that was coming across from the Fort Cowan. And there was also another one at Point Lookout from Dunwich and one at Cleveland. Later on, of course, we did camps, and I was sort of more or less full-time until about March. I think it was about March when the events in Europe went wrong, and I realised that perhaps I ought to think about doing something. And my friend Ralph Carey and I, we joined up together in June. I'm not sure of the date, it might have been the 6th, but I'm not quite sure of that. And we went to a camp at Caloundra, where we got basic training. And then from there I was promoted to sergeant and went to 2nd 26th Battalion when it was formed at Groveley in November that same year. And I was fortunate then to be selected with half a dozen of us were sent off. The Colonel wanted reinforcement officers. So we went down to Liverpool to a training school, and my friend Graham Burke and I were fortunate enough to top the school. And when we came back, both Graham and myself immediately got positions, platoons, because some of them had gone off. We had a Captain Spence, who I never knew, but he went to, I think it was Ambon, the Colonel. And so we trained, and we went off as original officers, not as reinforcement.
Now, how did you, let's move forward, and how did you get to Singapore? What vessel did you go on?
On the Marnix Van East and Aldegondi, I pronounced it, I hope it's correct, from Melbourne. We trained at Bathurst. It snowed that day at Bathurst, and we had a pie and a soft drink, I think, for lunch. After leaving camp, we marched to the station, which was 7 or 8 miles, I think, and waited. We left the camp around about 4 o'clock in the morning, and trained at, I think it was 12 or 1 o'clock. And we got to Young, and by that time we were pretty hungry. And the ladies of the town had food there for us, the whole trainload.
And how many vessels were in the convoy going to Singapore?
There were 2 other smaller ships, and we had a Navy escort. I'm not sure if it was the Canberra or not.
And what date did you arrive in Singapore?
It was August. I'm not sure the precise date.
August 41.
41.
Where were you deployed then?
The Gordon Highlanders had more or less adopted us as mother unit, and they directed all our tents and things at Changi. and we went straight into tents there.
Mm.
We trained on the island for some period, and then our company, B Company, went to the Sedili Bazaar River, where they had a boom across the river. It was situated, there was a river port called Mawai, which I've called my house, and the mouth of the river. The mouth of the river was 24 miles from Mawai, and this boom was about halfway.
Mm-hmm.
They had a couple of pillboxes which we never used. But
is that on the mainland?
It's on the mainland.
And
yes,
on the east coast or the west
east
coast? East coast.
Off from Kota Tingi, if you've
Mm-hmm.
ever heard of that. And the British had told us that the jungle was impenetrable.
Mm.
So we were ordered on a patrol, some of us, at least one patrol every day. And we were directed to go to different areas. And often we had tin boats, Tonkins we called them, mounted with 3-pounder naval guns in the front.
Mm-hmm.
And we'd go off in these and get off somewhere and walk through. And you could get through any of the jungle if you followed an elephant track or something like that.
Yes.
And then when you needed to, you might have to cut a bit of the way through, but it was fairly soft.
Yes.
And we did that for some time, and then we were called, withdrawn, and went to Jason near Malacca, where the main battalion was camped.
Mm-hmm.
And A Company took over from us.
Yes, so it's over on the west coast now.
We were near Malacca.
Yes. Now, were you aware when the Japanese invaded in early December?
Oh yes. By that time, we'd come from Justin across to Kota Tingi, and evidently the CO got word that the Japs were coming south, a big convoy, and they suspected they'd come up the rivers. They thought our river was one of them that'd come up. And so the colonel at 12 o'clock one night, he sent me off to this Mawai. And I was there for some time with my platoon, and the colonel decided that I needed more troops, so he kept sending me more. Sent me an attachment of mortars, heavy machine guns, a section of carriers, some signalmen, and then at the very last I got a 25-pounder gun from the 2nd 15th, I think it was, and their crew with it. So I had 125 personnel altogether, and they never sent another officer.
Yes, yeah.
Strange.
So you had a company?
Yeah.
Mm.
So I was delighted with this.
Yes.
We dug trenches and all sorts of things.
Now, when did you first have contact with the Japanese?
Well, from there, you asked me about did I know them, or we heard the planes going over
Yes.
from Singapore.
Yeah.
And we also could hear the naval battle with the Prince of Wales and Repulse. Distant, we could hear it.
Well, I suppose when did you actually have physical contact with the Japanese?
Oh yes, yes. So when the war actually started, we were sent over to the main western highway, and we were actually in reserve to the 2nd 30th Battalion that was at Gemas in the Comanche River, and our battalion, our company were not in action then, but my platoon was forward, 12th platoon, and the next day after Gemas I was sent out to make contact, which I did, and we lost 4 killed and 8 wounded, I think. But we encountered quite a few Japs, of course. One of our sections was within grenade throwing range, and these Japs were in soft ground cover, and so it did quite a bit of damage.
Yes, yeah. Was there a point when you started withdrawing down towards Kota Baru? Was it Kota Baru? Johor Baru, sorry.
Oh yes, yes. Well, we were well north of Johor.
Yes, yeah.
We were in Johor State.
Yeah.
We sort of were brought back more or less immediately. We came back, we had this position, and the Japs followed us. And we were pretty busy getting back ourselves because we had wounded to carry.
Mm. Were you going back on foot or?
On foot, yeah.
On foot?
We didn't have any, never ever had any.
Mm.
Well, I shouldn't say we never had any. A couple of times we had motor transport.
Mm.
But the Red Swartz decided that he'd put an outpost on a hill feature. It was a road coming in this way, and then this was just a dirt road, and on this hill feature just over the road from us. And when the Japs came, they made a mistake and they attacked this hill feature with a brigade, about a brigade force, and there was a corporal and 2 others with him.
Mm.
They fired a couple of shots and then came back and joined us. But he got artillery fire onto them and they never really attacked our position.
Mm. Do you remember crossing the causeway?
Oh yes, yes, we went across the causeway in vehicles.
Any idea of the approximate date that you went across? No, that, I mean, it's a difficult question.
I think that would be recorded. We weren't the first there.
Yes, yeah.
We went straight to Kranji.
Yes.
And to our amazement, there wasn't a stick of wire or anything else. No wire, and no. Some of our fellows raided an engineer's depot to get sandbags. Because when we started to dig, we went down 9 inches, and then we got salt water. So we had to get sandbags.
Yes. Yeah, I appreciate that. Yes.
Yeah.
So from Kranji, were you actually on the coastline or in the Kranji area when the Japanese came across in their boats and barges and what have you?
Absolutely, yeah. Right on the front. And they came up the Kranji
Creek,
or whatever you want to be called.
Yeah.
And a lot of them, I think, drowned were stuck in the mud and got drowned. But they came in from behind, which was a pretty clever move. An A company had to pull out, and I'd been called up to company headquarters, and I went up with my runner, and we were under heavy shell fire when he called me, but it had got dark on the way back. We came down the road, and I could hear a lot of gibbering going on ahead, and suddenly realised it was the Japs, and they were in behind my fellows on the road. They obviously didn't know it, but they were. So I had to go and pull my fellows out like a marble. We went back and formed back a little bit further back.
Yes. Did you have any 2nd, 4th machine gunners with you?
No. I don't think we ever had the 2nd, 4th. They got a bad time over with the 2nd 29s, a bit west of us.
Yes. And we'll sort of move forward to when Singapore, when the 15th of February 1942. Do you remember that evening, or did you know that there was going to be a surrender? Or?
Yes, I did. Actually, after we came back from Kranji, a company strength, well, it wasn't the full company, it was mostly A company, my platoon from B company. And I think there was some other pioneer Japs. And we were cut off, the Japs. Sorry. The Japs managed to make a line between us. So we pulled back and formed up another position and had a bit of a scrap with the Japs.
Yes.
And one Jap came back to us while we were there, one of these pioneers, and they'd been caught. I think 9 or 10 of them. And they'd sent this poor Jap back. They'd taken all his equipment, and he was in a terrible state. And he came to me and he said, "You've got to surrender." He said, "The Japs are going to kill the boys." I said, "Well, Captain Burns in charge. I took him over to Rupert, and Rupert had a lovely little habit of just lifting one side of his glasses, and this fellow straightened up straight away, you know. Rupert said to him, "I think I'm in charge," he said. This fellow was a soldier again.
Yes.
But unfortunately they did kill these fellows. They hated them. That we didn't know that until afterwards.
Yes. Yeah.
But we fought for some time. I had a chap next to me, a fellow called Rummel. I got two through one thigh and one through the other. I wrapped him up with his field dressing and then used mine on the other one. We got him out, and I lost one man there. That was all. But they were surrounding us.
Once capitulation took place,
I'm sorry, we moved forward to the east,
yes,
and joined the 2nd 30th.
Yes.
And we were with them for a few days, and then came back, and we came back to the company position. It must have been, I think, the 14th of February. So I had the 14th of February, and then the 15th of February in the afternoon, we were in the gardens, and there was a cutting. We were sort of on a little bit of a high rise. There was a cutting there, and this open car drove past with a great Union Jack flying behind and a white flag alongside it, and brass in the back seat, you know, high brass. So, well, I knew that they were sort of making negotiations anyway.
Yes, yes.
So that it wasn't too much of a shock.
Yes.
When they later on came and said we were to surrender at 8 o'clock.
Yes. So do you think that was Percival in the vehicle, or he did send a brigadier Newbigging?
Wild was with him.
Wild was with him, yes, Cyril Wild.
Wild was in the car.
Yeah.
Who the other man was, I suspected it was Percival, but whether it was, I'm not absolutely
Yeah.
sure.
Were they heading for Bukatima Road?
They must have been, yeah. Yeah, it would have been Bukatima Road, would it perhaps, that they were on inside the garden? My memory's a bit vague there.
Well, the surrender took
Place at the Shell.
place up at the Ford Motorworks,
Yeah, Ford Motorworks.
which was on Bukatima Road.
Yeah.
And that had been Yamashita's headquarters for a while.
Oh, has it? Yeah, so anyway, we paraded next morning, and the most humiliating experience of my life. But our fellows, my sergeant, Arthur Hutton, who was a Western man, being a manager of property, he said my father had given me a terrible thrashing if he knew I'd surrendered.
Yes, of course.
And this feeling was not entirely with all of them, but a lot of them felt this way. But they were shelling the civilian evacuees camps and causing terrible damage, and they'd cut off the water supply. They'd captured the water supply.
Yes.
So fortunately we had a well nest, but we were. I don't think probably the Brits could have done much else. They might have got us together. They could have.
You don't think that it would have been wise to defend at Johor Bahru and keep them away from the water rather than coming back onto the mainland and letting them get at it?
Well, on hindsight, yes. But we thought, and the boys used to say, wait till we get back to Singapore where those defences are, we'll be right.
Yeah.
And they'd shown us these marvellous gun emplacements, you know, bring them up from down below, and those 16-inch guns, and they could have outshot anything on the water, you know, fixed, more accurate and everything else, longer distance.
Yes.
But there was nothing, it's just the same as down here with small main roads.
Yes. Now, can we we'll move beyond the capitulation, and you're going out to Selarang barracks, and we come to the point when F Force is being assembled to go to Siam, as it was known. Was it known as Thailand then, or Siam?
I think we call it Thailand.
Yes, yeah. And do you know which train you went up on?
I think it was number 6.
Mm-hmm. And once you got to Bn POW, maybe we'll start from there, and you're going to march further north.
Yeah.
Did you know anything about where you were going at that
Oh,
stage?
yeah, we were going to a place for milk and honey.
Yes. Yeah.
But we got a bit of a shock when they said we had to do an 80-mile march.
Mm.
But of course it turned out to be a lot more than that.
Mm. Now I'm going to test your memory, and I'm not saying I'm testing your memory, but your recall of something. When you left Kanchanaburi and you march on to a place called Ta Thailand, do you have any recollection of those probably 2 to 3 days that it took to march from Kanchanaburi through to Ta Thailand?
Well, of course it was up the mountain.
Yes.
And that was after Bruce Hunt had been knocked about.
Oh, which camp was he knocked about in?
It was before we started to climb anyway.
Yes,
It was
yeah.
just before we started to climb.
Yeah.
Of course the Japs all came on parade with Boy Scout sticks, you know, to
Yeah.
help them up the mountain.
Yeah.
And I realised that there were groups set aside that were to be left behind.
Mm-hmm.
And perhaps I had nothing to do, but I went over and spoke to a couple of them, and one of them was a padre, and his name was Dean.
Mm.
And I talked to him, and the poor chap had hammer toes,
Mm.
and they were the most dreadful states, you know. He should never have been in the army.
Mm. And what age was he? You know, was he an older man?
Well, he was old, yes.
Mm.
He would have been in his late 30s or early 40s, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
And anyway, you know the story of Bruce Hunter. They had to carry this partridge to the next camp where he died.
Mm.
But
But you were going to tell me that Bruce and Cyril Wilde were beaten by the Japs
yes,
there.
we were all lined up, and Bruce said that he'd arranged with the Japanese medical officer for this number of men to remain behind.
Mm.
And I think he was only a corporal.
Mm.
Oh, no, you know, can't happen, they've got to go. And Bruce, you know, being the type that he was, he still persisted. And this fella took his stick to him, and you know, with a great long stick, and built it into him. And the line went like this, you know. And Bruce, I know he held up his hand and he said, "Stay, boys," something to that effect.
And was that Toyama that was hitting him, or would you know?
I don't think so.
No.
I'd have known Toyama straight away because I had an incident with him earlier. So I know who.
So what was that incident?
Well, that's just my incident.
Yeah, it's yours.
When we were in camp at, I think it was River Valley Camp earlier, and I'd been in charge of quite a big group that worked on the go down, and we were loading sugar, in great big bags of sugar, corn sack size, and these were heavy, and they were making them stack them up high without any machinery or anything else, and they were becoming absolutely knocked up, and you know, they were not too well fed even at that time. And there was a Japanese captain way up the other end of the go down, I could see him, so I marched up in my best military manner and suited smartly, and didn't ask him whether he could speak English, but just told him quietly what was happening and that it was too much, and could he help us? And then stepped back and saluted again and went off. And that was a great change. But of course I said to the lads, for heaven's sake, don't take any sugar. Don't have what you can eat here. Don't take any away, because they'll give you a proper search tonight, because they'll be cranky with what I've done. And anyway, one fellow was caught with sugar, and they got into an officer was there,
Yes.
Graham Burke. But we came back, and so it'd been a pretty hectic day. When we came back to the camp, we found that there were Indian. This is the Indians about the first time they'd been on duty. And I met Toyama. And he said, "You salute." This is a private Indian. This poor old Indian, he was terrified then. And I stood my ground, and had it been later on, I'd have been flat on the ground, you know. But it was early days for Toyama, I think. I didn't realise until afterwards what had happened, but he was just starting to get into his raid. He always used to build himself up to a lovely raid. When the sergeant of the guard said, "Move on," of course there were more POWs workmen coming behind. So we had to stand aside, let us.
Yes.
So that was my first instance.
Now, talking about Padre Dean, do you know what happened to him subsequently?
Only that he died.
Yes, yeah.
Exhaustion.
Yeah. Now, on the march up, just briefly, can you describe
well, it started off with storms in the evening. I think the first night we moved out from our first camp, there was a terrific storm. We paraded at about 5 p.m. I think, and then moved off. But a few camps further on, the monsoon started, and it was just a quagmire. This was the trouble. We marched all night. They just started us early afternoon, or not late afternoon, I should say. And we wouldn't arrive until next morning. And this was too long, but of course there were so many wheat fillers, I suppose, they did this purposely. But that was the worst feature.
Now, who was the doctor that was with your group that were marching, number 6 train marching up there?
Well, whether Bruce Hunt was on our train or not, I'm not quite sure. Or whether he'd been on the camp before, but he certainly went off with us at that stage. I don't remember seeing him before, and I think that was the first occasion I'd ever seen Bruce. And Major Wall too. I don't quite see why he was on our train, and I don't think he was on our train.
Yes, he did stop behind at a camp or two.
Yes, well that's what he must have done, I think.
Yeah. And what about your clothes? I mean, how much clobber had you brought up to Thailand with you?
Well, as I moved off from Bn POW, the ties were there, you know, wanting to buy stuff. And I had 2 changes of clothes, shorts and a shirt. That's what it meant to, and perhaps some socks. And I traded this for a kilo of tobacco. I was a smoker at that stage. It was the best investment I think I ever made, because it lasted me pretty well the whole of the time. And then towards the end I managed to get a pipe. Some poor chap, I suppose, had died, and I boiled this pipe up, and they didn't like a pipe, but still, you know, they used it. And I'd often have it in my mouth, and no smoke or no tobacco.
Yes.
But so I then had one change, and then we'd stop. We usually stop, march 1 night or 2 nights, and then stop a night, and have 1 night's rest. And if there was water, any water, and there usually was, I'd wash what I was wearing and hopefully get it dry during the day.
Yes. How were your boots holding up?
I was very fortunate. I got a new pair of boots. Soon after I'd taken prisoner, I think, and before we went away, not because I knew we were going away, but just they had cobblers there that were using rubber tyres to put a sole on. So I had this thick rubber sole on the bottom of my boot, and that lasted. I think it came out. They came off eventually, but I still had good leather boots.
Yes, yes.
So I was very fortunate.
So did you manage to keep that pair of boots the whole time?
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
Very lucky. Where was when you sort of got up to the northern end, around the Nikkei, and the Songkurai camps. Where was your main first stop?
Well, I'd tell you about Nicky.
Please.
We went in there, and that was my introduction to cholera.
Mm.
As we marched in at about 8 o'clock in the morning, there was a Burmese woman, and she had a baby at the breast, and the baby broke away and vomited and then squirted too at the same time.
Mm.
And I sort of thought, you know, what's this?
Mm.
And we didn't realise until later on that it was cholera.
Mm.
But when we came out, they knew all about this woman and the baby, and they were both dead.
Mm.
So when we got to In Songkurai, and the huts were there, but they didn't have any roofs.
Mm.
Well, they had structures, but, but the outhap had gone.
Mm.
And the toilet latrine was just a big, dreadful.
Mm.
And Bruce Hunt didn't come with us to that camp. We were there a few days before Bruce arrived, and the morale had gone on pieces. But by that time, did that affect you?
Yeah, but yeah, we'll keep going.
One of the cowboys doing the lawn, isn't
Yes, well, you have to have the lawn done. Mm. So you're in Shimo, and Bruce came.
No, yes, and the morale, of course, of toilets and everything else, and cholera was starting, and of course dysentery, and everybody was absolutely knocked up from the march. Morale was down to the aces, and old Bruce came in and just lined us up and abused us to start with, and then told us the story of cholera and how it could kill him in 4 hours, and I know he said 65% deaths or something like this. He gave us the statistic anyway, and then said that we had to pull our socks up and call for volunteers to man the cholera tent. He was going to segregate them. And a whole lot of things stepped forward, so he wrote a particular one. And almost immediately following this, he got the officers on the go to do dig new latrines. And this, of course, most tremendous.
Yes.
Just,
So you went up there about May 43. You left Singapore in April. So you add 20 days. It's May 43.
Yeah.
What was the work that the men were doing up there?
Road, working on the road.
Was that corduroying? Is that the term that they use, or was it just roads?
I think there was a lot of corduroying. So
yes.
that's where they put the timber truck.
Yes, yeah.
Anything to get the trucks through.
Yes.
And they were very clever, the Japs. They could convert them to tracks
Yes.
to run on the rail.
Yep. So you're in Shimo, Songkurai, or do you remember Lloyd Carl being there, and
No.
Frank Carl?
Yeah, just remember Frank.
Yeah. Patrick Wolf. So we're in Shimo, Songkurai, and was there a big hospital there, or was it no? Where was the hospital?
Well, yeah, it ended up a big hospital, but all they were the huts.
Yes.
And there were 4 wardmasters, so you can imagine how many sick there were.
Yes.
They were all sick.
Who were the other wardmasters?
Well, Perry, Crouch, Dean, and I can't remember the 4th.
Yeah. And
I should, but I don't think I knew him terribly well, but he was a bright boy.
yeah. Did you ever see the Japanese commander for that area, Colonel Bn POW?
Oh, in the distance, in the distance. But the officers kept away, the ordinary Jap could be treating you quite well, and then suddenly an officer would appear and a rise a long way away, and things had changed altogether straight away. You giving the call, are you?
That's if it's...
Now, Norm, we've just had a little break, and we've reached the stage where there is a very high build-up of the number of sick in Air Force and in your area, and there is a decision made to create a hospital camp somewhere else. Were you privy to those arrangements?
No. No. I was at that stage in number 3 camp, and I don't remember too much about it, except that we were loaded on transport trucks and driven to a spot just south of the Three Pagoda Pass, and we had no food on the way, but the truck we were in had a lot of rice. It must have carried rice. There was quite a bit of rice on the floor, so I said to my boys, "You better pick that up." "Oh, we never dumped that off the floor." I said, "You get it, we might be very glad of it." And we didn't get any food that night, so they were delighted to have this rice to cook.
Yes.
And as a matter of fact, we had sufficient to feed half a dozen colonels,
yes.
Indian Army colonels that were there. And we must have had 4 inches of rain that night, just out in the open. But that was part of the thing. And then the next morning we went off again to Tambaya.
That was by train then, was it?
No, the train wasn't through. The train went through, was completed, the line was completed when we were at Tambaya.
Yes. And do you remember the layout of the camp?
Vaguely.
Well, maybe a better question was, what was the water supply like at that camp?
Well, the water supply, I remember that quite well, because the cookhouse was down beside the water. It was a creek, and quite a good creek, and plenty of water in it when we went there. But by the time we left, of course, there was only just a water hole.
Did you have wells there as well?
I think there might have been a well. There was a big high tank and stand. I don't know how they got the water there, but we didn't use that.
I suppose before we get too involved in Tambaya, because we'll come back to this person, but we've run through a little bit about some of the doctors who are in Air Force, but can you tell me anything about the chaplains, like starting with George Pillane?
Gordon Pillane was our battalion MO.
Chaplain.
Sorry,
chaplain, yeah.
Padre, yes. He was regarded very, very highly in action. He refused to wear a tin hat. I think he'd seen service in the First World War. But it didn't seem to shape up quite so well as a prisoner of war. Which, and this applied sometimes the opposite in some cases to men. But he was outstanding during action.
Yes, yeah.
I didn't have a lot to do with him as a prisoner of war, but he did buy fruit and a bit of stuff for camp at one stage.
Yes.
And it was suggested that he fiddled a little bit.
Yes. Yeah.
Whether it was the fruit or I think feed.
So do you remember a Presbyterian chaplain by the name of Andrews at all? What about Paddy Walsh?
Paddy Walsh, yes. Paddy Walsh was a little fellow with a heart as big as a bullock. I thought he was marvellous. There was another RC, he was RC, Dolan, I think his name.
Yes, Michael Patrick Dolan.
Yeah, I was getting confused because we had a Nolan here at Cleveland, Dolan, yeah. And he was an older man, but marvellous.
He came up with Air Force, but he was evacuated down south on one of the barges, ill at one stage,
yeah.
yes.
Well, I didn't really come in contact with him a great deal. And then there was Usher. Usher was there too. He had been our battalion padre.
So what religion was Usher?
I didn't really have any contact with him on the railway. But I believe that the boys didn't regard him highly at all when we were in Bathurst. They called him, with a big tongue, they called him Mudguts. But I believe that as a POW padre he was outstanding.
Yes, yeah. And what about Noel Duckworth?
Well, Noel Duckworth, of course, was a marvellous, only a little tiny chap with rosy red cheeks, and you know his story, or I think I've said it to you, my story, didn't I? Send it to you? I sent you something like that?
No.
No? I thought I had. Anyway, I've got it here, I can show it to you when we go. He was at Cambridge, and
Go on.
he boxed the Cambridge boat crew.
Yes.
And they won, beat Oxford 3 successive years, and then his team were chosen to tour the continent, and they won everything, and then he went to the Olympic Games as their cox. But they didn't win. They came second.
Quite an outstanding man. And we'll come back to him. We'll continue now with talking about Tanbaya, where he was your chaplain.
Yeah.
Do you have any? Do you know the figures of the? Well, maybe I'll suggest Fred Stahls, who was up there, and he looked as if Fred must have been the adjutant of the camp or something like that, was he?
Fred. Oh, I think he would have been. Yeah.
And he claims that there were 671 deaths in Tanbaya. About a third of everyone that moved up there died.
Yes. I would have thought there might have been even more.
Yes.
But he would know, because he'd probably be on the administrative side, you know.
Yes. Now,
of course, we had more deaths after he went.
Yes, yeah, after they went down the line.
Yes, I've forgotten how many.
Now, Frank Carl was the only surgeon up there.
That's right.
Did you do any work with him at all?
Only this post-mortem I was telling you about.
Yes.
That's the only experience that I had with him.
Now, as you were a wardmaster.
Not at Tanbaya, no.
Oh, weren't you? No.
Only at number 1 camp.
Yes, yeah. Well, can you just tell me a little bit about what are the duties of a wardmaster?
Well, mainly it was to generally keep an eye on the boys and try and look after them. They were all sick. And one of the biggest jobs I felt I had was when rations got so short that of course the Japs said no work, no food.
Yes.
And so we had to take away from the working fellas to give the sick blokes anything at all. And it got down so bad at one stage that I decided I was the only one that could serve my ward myself. So I dished out 2 level spoonfuls of rice per man a meal, and there was a bit of watery stuff to go with it. So you kept an eye on them, but, you know, there wasn't really a lot you could do except to talk to them.
So I understood that as a ward master it was your role to ensure that the medical orderlies were free of as many other duties as possible so they could concentrate on looking after the sick. When you're in Tanbaya, were you aware that there was a big hospital camp for A Force not very far away?
No, I wasn't. I wasn't, but I think probably Bruce Hunt would have been, because after that experience with Fakuda that I was telling you about, Mickey Moore, who was our intelligence officer, went off somewhere and brought back quinine, a pack full of quinine, which must have saved many lives.
Yeah. Was Cyril Wilde with you in Tanbaya as well?
No,
He didn't come up
I
there.
think so. No, he'd have been with the British force, I think.
Yes, yeah. There was a British doctor by the name of Emery, who I understand was well, he did a lot of the anaesthetics for Frank Carl.
Yes.
And I know on some information I've got that Frank Carl did 40 amputations, but there was a very low survival rate of only 4.
Yeah.
Did you ever do any nursing or that sort of thing? No. Do you remember leaving Tanbar to go when the line was finished? Or maybe that's a good point.
Yes,
when,
I'm a bit vague on that one.
Yes.
We went by rail in trucks, rail trucks, to Canberra, where we stayed another month. Land of plenty. That's where it was, land of milk and honey.
Yes.
My friend Graham Burke had 12 eggs, which he was beating up as an omelette for me. Why he gave me the 12 at once, I don't know. And I said, "Hey Graham, that one's a bit doubtful, isn't it?" "Oh, protein," he said. "Get it in here, Dee Dee."
So this is down at
Canberra.
At Kanchanaburi or Canberra, yes, yeah. How many weeks were you there before you moved on to?
I think we were there about a month.
Yes.
I got a terrible bout of malaria there.
Yes.
Different to what I'd had before, because I was vomiting and I'd never had that before.
Do you know how many attacks of malaria you had?
Oh, no, I don't. I wasn't too bad on the railway. You know, I had a few attacks. How many, I don't remember, but not a great lot. But when we got back to Changi, particularly when we moved over near the jail, we seemed to get a recurring attack almost monthly. Might not be quite as regular as that, but near enough.
Yes.
I suppose we're getting weaker and less resistance.
Yes. Now, when you came from Tanbar down into Thailand, there was a party left behind.
Yes.
And I understand that it was something like 200, and Bruce Hunt actually figured that about 100 of them wouldn't have survived. Do you know whether that was about right? Or?
I know that when the main force was going, the Japs were going to take the lot. And Bruce said to them, "If you take the lot, 100 and so many unnecessary ones will die. But if you leave so many behind, I think it was 500, we'll only lose 127," or somebody gave some magical figure out of the air.
Yes.
And so the Japs agreed. And I believe this was pretty well precisely the number that did die. But some of them are still fairly sick, of course.
Yes, yeah. And I think you indicated you don't really remember much of the train journey down to Thailand?
No, except that we pushed off on the side, and it took some time. Time I don't remember now.
No. Down in Thailand, very near, within probably 60 kilometres of the bridge over the River Kwai, there's what they call the Wampo Viaduct, where there's a sheer cliff on one side and a drop into the water on the other. You don't remember going over that?
Some of it was very beautiful.
Yes.
Yes, some of it was. Not especially.
Do you remember crossing the bridge then?
Oh yes, yes. We built a bridge well, I say we built a bridge. We worked on a bridge. It had been. This was where the British camp was.
Yes.
And
Songkurai itself.
Yeah. And I had one of my boys, MacArthur, was right up on the top of the bridge, partially built, and he must have annoyed the Jap up there somehow or other, because he came at him with a 12-pound sledgehammer, and he was swinging his sledgehammer, and then MacArthur was quite an athlete, and he just dodged him. But when he reversed the thing round and attacked him with the handle, he let him hit him. And his house, I can still see it coming down like this. And it seems to take an age, and I expected MacArthur to come with it, but he didn't. And the Jap seemed to be satisfied after it hit him.
So you were there when that bridge was finished?
No, it wasn't finished.
Yeah. Was that the bridge which is commonly called the Bridge of 1,000 Lives, where there was a high death rate?
Well, I wouldn't be surprised, because that's where the British suffered the greatest casualties. You know, that's where I sort of relate 2,000 to 200, but those figures are wrong, of course.
The engineer in charge of that was a Lieutenant Abbey.
Yes, yes. Abbey, I think.
Yeah, Abbey, yeah. And I saw an interview with him where he contended that if the weather was bad, he was worried about the safety of the POWs, and he'd only use his own Japanese men to work on it. That's all right, Alison. Please. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, have you seen that report on Abbey?
No, no.
Okay, so you're back in Kanchanaburi now, and you how did you get to Singapore? Where did they take you into Bangkok before they put you onto trains, or?
Oh, we just went straight through.
From there?
No, we didn't go to Bangkok. We
no,
just
from Kanchanaburi.
From Bn POW.
Yep.
And that was a more pleasant trip. I remember buying mangoes. I don't know it was one or two, but they were the most beautiful mangoes I've ever eaten in my life.
Yes.
Might have had something to do with where we'd been, of course.
Yes.
But they really were good.
Yeah. Do you remember your reception when you got to Singapore?
No.
No.
I couldn't tell you how we got from the railway station to the camp.
Yes. Yeah.
We didn't walk.
Yes. Yeah. And maybe. So you're back in Singapore in early 1944.
Yes.
So you have nearly another 18 months of the war to go.
Yes, I think I'd been away pretty well 12 months, whereas the others had come back 3 months earlier, I think.
Yes, yeah. So what did you do whilst you were in?
Out of part in Singapore.
Yeah, well, you were back in the. Did you shift into the Changi prison then when you went back into Singapore?
Yeah, I never went into the actual prison.
No.
But they had huts outside, and I was in the hut E1. And my friend that was here from Victoria Point, Graham Wilson, he was a Rhodes Scholar in '39 and took agriculture. And before he went to Oxford, he joined the AF. And somebody or other, whether it was our own people or not, but there was some land down in front of the coolie lines where all the colonels, all the Rotten Row we call it, all the Indian Army colonels were housed. And the British had one piece, about the size of a building block. And the British had one piece, we had the next piece, and the Dutch had another piece. And the poor old British used to scratch the top of the land and sort of get stuff that would grow about so high. And the Dutch would go down so deeply, it had all been reclaimed land, I think. They brought up saline stuff. And I suppose if they'd been there another 12 months, that they would have benefited, but it's, you know, they bring the raw stuff up. Whereas we dug trenches about 9 inches deep and went out and got lady grass, or lalang as they call it, and brought this back and threw it in, and then we'd try and get ashes if we could from the kitchen, although they were in demand, and collected urine. And in that way we grew a plant that they brought over from Java called a biome. It's like the red coxcomb that they grow in the garden, you know, those sort of red. And we grew it to 6 feet, at least 6 feet, and we'd cut it and we'd get 2 more crops, lower, you know, smaller, but that really produced. We started off growing beans first, the climbing bean. We had a beautiful crop of that, but there was no body, no real body, whereas this was real substance.
Yes.
And so we helped our cookhouse tremendously.
Do you remember the day that the war was over? When you first heard it was all over?
Yes, I do. A couple of days before, there'd been a raid on the area, on our huts. I was not quite sure what they were looking for. I think they were looking for the radio. And they came in and there was a sergeant in charge, and he stood at the doorway here, and there was a broom beside the door. So he hung on this like a lint on it.
Mm.
And there was a little table beside him as well. And you know that fellow's name that ran the wireless? You remember it? The radar boy?
No.
Anyway, it was his bunk, and he was actually holding the wireless in the broom. There was one in the broom, and he had another one in one of the legs of the table. And we didn't know it at the stage. We had a fair idea there was one in the hut. Those sort of things you didn't want to know about. It was better, because you couldn't tell anyone. And they went all through and then went off.
Yes.
And that day we got official word came round to say that they'd, or it might not be that day, a couple of days afterwards, to say they'd dropped the bomb, and they'd given them a week. And old Blackjack sent word to say that 3 months' rice issue had just come in, and that he was going to give it to us in this week, because at the end of the week we might have to make a run for it, and if we'd had a bit to eat, we might be able to run just a little bit further. So I thought he was a very brave act on his part, because we'd have starved otherwise, you know.
Yes.
3 months' rice we were different people at the end of the week. You wouldn't believe what a week's worth of food did to us.
Did you recall him running up it was either a Union Jack or I don't know whether, was there an Australian flag then?
I don't remember an Australian flag, I remember a Union Jack. And I've seen one in Melbourne with some of our fellas, our battalion name. One was a Sergeant Smith, I remember. Some of them had signed during the war and didn't make it, and had died. I think someone that was in medical, an orderly or something like that stayed in Singapore, Changi all the time, probably had it. But I've heard since that there was more than the one flag.
The one you're referring to is at the shrine, is it?
That's right, yeah.
And how long did it take you to get back to Australia, and how did you get back?
I came back on the Large Bay, the same boat that you said Frank and Carl came back on. I'd guess it a fortnight. We were punchy, if you can understand what I mean. And I didn't really accept, although these other two friends of mine I was telling you about, we managed to get a ride in with one of the first Yanks that came. They had a jeep and a trailer, and we rode in the back of this trailer. I've never had such a terrible ride in all my life, into Singapore. And we walked around, we finished up on the docks, and we found a car, a standard 10 I think it was, and it had a flat tyre, so that empty left us. And we changed the tyre and drove it off. And we had this for a few days, until someone pinched it from us. But we were able to actually be at we'd gone to Raffles to ask them for a drink or something like this. No money, you know, we'd forgotten you needed money, I think. I don't think we went intentionally not to pay, but the waiter said, "I'm terribly sorry, all we can give you is water." So we had a glass of cold water, which was very, very nice. And then we went across just a little way. There was a big palanque in front of the council chambers, and the peace was taking, peace ceremony.
Mm.
And all this padding was absolutely chock-a-block full of Jap soldiers.
Yes, yeah.
And Lord Louis came out on the veranda and spoke with us. We couldn't hear the surrender going on, but we knew it was going on. And we were there. It was very, very interesting.
Yes, yeah. And how long did? What date were you discharged from the army?
I know that we left roughly on about the 23rd of September. That's probably not the right date, but sometime about that time in September.
I might just hold you there. So when you took your discharge, which was fairly quick, occurring in December 1940, when did you resume a civilian career?
Early in February. My dad was in real estate here in Cleveland since 1920, and he said, look, I'm doing valuations, and he said everything had to be valued. And he said, you could come in with me if you'd like to.
Yes.
And of course I'd hurt my back. I knew it was no good going onto a small crop farm where you're bending all the time. So I agreed to go in with him. But unfortunately he died within a month. Heart attack.
Yes.
And my brother, who had had some real estate experience pre-war, he'd farmed all during the war, but pre-war he had. That was a Brisbane agent. He said, oh, I'll come in with you. So we joined. And my dad was E.C. Dean, and we called ourselves E.C. Dean and Sons.
Yes.
And that name is still going, although I've got nothing to do with it except they're in my building.
Yes. Now, you just mentioned your back wound or injury. We hadn't covered that on the video interview. Would you like to tell us something about that and who the doctor was that looked after you?
Yes. Well, I think we were camped in houses, civilian houses, immediately behind the Ford Works at Bukatima. And we went daily to the Bukatima quarry where the Japs blew the rock, and then we picked it up and put it into skips, and they ran on a little rail down to a crushing plant. And they did their blowing at midday when we were having lunch. And I was standing in line. Matter of fact, I'd just been served my meagre rice, and when I got this terrible hit in the back, I felt a tram or something like that had hit me and it knocked me to the ground. And it was quite a big lump of rock with its finger on it. It went in close to the spine, and in due course, when it suited the Japs to go back to camp, they took me back, and I saw Cole Jutner, and Roy Mannion, the dentist, was with him. And they were both concerned. I remember Roy Mannion saying, oh, I think it's a Changi job, and I knew by that 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 must be serious then. Anyway, Cole Jutner put in his index finger into my back and was able to tell me afterwards that there was no real damage to my spine. And he bandaged me up, and I was right again in a few days.
Yes, yes. Well, it's nice to have that. I have written some material about Cole Jutner, or Jutner, and that'll be something when I have an opportunity I'll add to it.
Okay.
Yeah. Norm, I think we've just about wrapped anything. There are two things I'd like to put to you. One might be difficult. Would you recall the worst thing that you experienced as a prisoner of war?
Well, that little one I told you about, MacArthur up on top of the bridge, was a very nasty experience. But when we were number 3 camping on the bridge, I went to work with group one day, and when I got there, the engineers had wire or not heavy wire, it was sort of more or less a tyre wire, but it was a bit stiff. And they grouped it together into like a little bunch. And I thought to myself, what in the goodness are we going to do with this? Anyway, we soon found out, because the idea was if somebody wasn't working hard enough or did something that displeased them, they dipped his lid and gave him a good whack over the head with this wire. And that was pretty nasty. And at the same time, not necessarily the same day, but one of the chaps had malaria and couldn't work. So they made him kneel on a log, and if he fell then they bashed him. And until he, you know, even the bashing didn't just recover. And that was a nasty experience. But I think the worst of all was when they raided the camp at number 3 and took fellas out of the berry ward. Mainly affecting their legs. And they were put on a pile driver, about 20 more, and they had to pull this great rope and let the weight drop down. And they said, we want to get this work finished, and you're going to have to work late, but we'll have an extra meal for you when you get back to camp. Well, we certainly worked late. We worked till 3 o'clock in the morning, and we got back to camp, and I stopped at the guardhouse and said to the chap sergeant, where do we get this meal? Oh, no meal. And I said, but these men were promised a meal. I said, they've worked till 3 o'clock in the morning, they should have a meal. He didn't argue the point with me, he just clocked me. And I went down into the mud, and I had to take them back without any food. But it was the fellas on the pile driving thing that, you know, was the upsetting thing.
Yeah. Do you remember a Captain Euro that was up on the line at all?
Scotty Euro, oh yes.
Yeah.
He was a mixed up boy with Scotty Euro.
Yeah.
He was a Scottish parents, born in China, and had a Russian tutor. He was reputed to be a major in Chiang Kai-shek's army, and got malaria or got something and came down here for treatment, and joined the AOF as a private. And he went to the officer school, not with the first group, but with another group, to the same school, commission. And I had developed a bad ear. It must have been the immediate school after the one I was at. And I had to go off for treatment, and then I got a week's leave, and I'd left my web equipment and rifle at the camp, so I had to go make a trip to Liverpool to get it.
Yes.
And as I was coming away with this gear, here's poor old Scotty on the parade ground doing pack drill.
Yes, yeah, yeah.
And what on earth had he done, I don't know, probably had a dirty rifle or something.
Yes, yeah. Yeah. And I did ask you what was your worst experience. Is there anything, what, I mean, lots of people say it was dreadful, but you know, they still took something out of it.
The outstanding experience I had was with Noel Duckworth on the Christmas Eve of what would have been 1943, I suppose. He had a little chapel set up, you know, well, you know, a bit of a communion rail and a couple of logs that you could sit on. And he had a midnight service. I'd never been to a midnight service because I wasn't Anglican. But everybody in the camp went. And if they couldn't walk, they were carried there. It didn't matter what religion they were, they were there.
And was this still in Ten Bay or?
Still in Ten Bay. And that was the most moving experience. It really was outstanding. And then again, he coupled with an Australian. I seem to think his name was Walker, but I'm not quite certain of that. I think he was a Methodist minister. And they had this combined service. He built a bit of palisade around, and everybody stood up, and he'd have thousands there. And these these English regular soldiers that come with tattoos all over them, you know, and you wouldn't think they'd ever been near a church.
Yes, yeah.
He'd held them.
Now that, I have heard about that. I thought that was down in Kanchanaburi.
Well, it may have been there
Yes,
too.
yes,
I don't
yeah,
know.
yes.
I don't remember him there
No,
because
no.
he'd gone.
Yes.
But there was a padre, as I came into Kamburi,
Yeah.
there's a poor old padre sitting in a trench, and he'd done something wrong. And the Japs had him in there, and he was without food and water, I understand it. And they managed to get a bit of water to him you know, under darkness. But I don't even remember, didn't know his name. I never met him.
Well, Norm, I think we might wrap it there. And
Okay.
may I say how much I appreciate you giving me your time to record a little bit of history. And thank you.
Sorry, it's probably an awful lot more now, but you can't.
Oh no. As we go away, you'll remember something else.
Right, yeah.
It's inevitable. Thank you so much.
But, so I suppose